Welcome back to another video. I hope you all are having a wonderful afternoon. This is Atmospheric Alex here with a video update on the future of this hurricane season and all the uncertainty that lies ahead. Now, before we do get started with the video, I just want to explain this thumbnail really quickly. So, I'm calling for high forecast uncertainty for the rest of the season, obviously. And if you're wondering what this big red box is over here, over the southeast, this is just an area I've noticed perk up a little bit on latest model data. This is not me hyping saying, we're going to have major hurricanes here. Whoa, no. This isn't me saying that. This is just me looking at the models, interpreting the data, saying that there is a heightened chance for tropical system development across those areas. Nothing to be too concerned about yet. Now, just before we really get into the big discussion here on the hurricane season, I wanted to quickly brief on Hurricane Ernesto right now. It is a Category 2, and it is heading incredibly close here to Bermuda. It looks like it might make a very close pass just to the east, but regardless, you guys on Bermuda, it looks like Saturday morning, well, mainly Friday night to Saturday morning, you can expect tropical storm to even hurricane force conditions on the island. So that includes damaging winds, heavy rainfall, maybe some waterspout tornado activity. And that is, the real big concerns here, as well as storm surge as well. Alright, now for our in-depth discussion. This will probably be a bit of a longer video. I'll try and see what I can do about that, but we're going to be taking a look at first at our Climate Prediction Center's tropical weather outlook for the next 3 weeks. So what we could see here for week 2, this is August 21st, August 27th, is a moderate chance for tropical weather development here across the main development region, and a slight risk across the larger majority of the main development region for the Leeward, Windward Islands over here, including some of our greater Antilles friends over there in the Caribbean. But this is not the main spotlight of this whole entire video. What is week 3. This in particular has me a little concerned. This is August 28th through September 3rd. We are talking about a high chance for tropical weather development here. We're talking the far northern main development region, pushing into kind of going north of the Caribbean a little bit. This is kind of where things get a little bit complicated, and we're going to have to look at our overall steering patterns to determine where these storms will go, since they're coming off at such a high latitude. I'd also like to note, portions of the Caribbean yet again are favorable. We're even talking about the Bahamas there. I'm looking at you, and I'm expecting in week 4 for this whole entire conglomeration, this blob, to probably shift off to the west a little bit to include more of our Gulf of Mexico friends and our southeast to mid-Atlantic friends in the US. So with all this tropical weather favorability, well, what are the chances it develops into something very significant? Very high. We have very, very hot sea surface temperatures right now. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. We're talking about temperatures between 32 to almost 33.5 degrees Celsius. This is your upper 80s, low 90s. Again, I wouldn't even be shocked if we try and crack a couple mid 90s here along the New Orleans coast there. We'll just have to see there. But we're talking about the majority of the Caribbean here that is also piping hot. We're talking between 30 to 31 degrees Celsius, so mid to upper 80s. This is well over enough to sustain a violent hurricane that decides to push through this area, and you better hope it doesn't track it to the Gulf, or it's going to be all hands on deck. It's also important to mention Bermuda as well. I know you all are going to be about to go through a lot here with Ernesto, but if you have a system that starts over here and, tracks through these waters again, I mean, take a look at this. 30 degrees Celsius in some areas. So mid 80s, again, enough to sustain a violent hurricane if our upper level conditions can become more favorable. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this one nearly gave me the chills. This is your ocean heat content, and we're talking about values that are off the charts for almost the entire Western Caribbean right now. This is very significant, and you better hope, like I said, you do not get a tropical system that goes through this area with low wind shear, or it will be a huge issue indeed. We're even talking about this in the Gulf as well. Values well over 175 in those maxed out regions. Just bubbling hot out there like a bathtub, even like a hot tub in some areas. With a closer zoomed in view of the Western Caribbean, you even have some values that go over 200 OHC, even in the Gulf. This is very nearly historic. We cracked these values last year and a little earlier this year, and we'll see if these continue to rise, or hopefully they'll begin to fall, but we're not quite at peak season yet, so these should keep going up to 210, 220 once again. And before I move to the next slide, I wanted to explain what OHC means. Ocean heat content, it's basically how much energy is stored in the ocean, how far down the sea surface temperatures end up going. Okay, now for a long-range look at our GEFS model, which has been doing okay with this hurricane season, despite not realizing the upper level environment well at all at this point. We're going to take a look at our wind shear forecast. I would generally look at all three parameters, but at this time of year, our precipitation anomalies, our PWATs, are pretty much locked in for peak season. So we're going to look here at your wind shear anomalies. I'd like to note your very potent Eastern African jet here across, Africa, obviously, and going into the main development region. This is basically causing a big close for any tropical activity in this area. It is shutting it down. We cannot see storms form here in such harsh conditions. And it's also important to note that all of your wind shear down here is pushing your area of tropical favorability way up to the north, and this is known as your intertropical convergence zone. And it is sitting all the way up here at 22 to 23 degrees north latitude. What you doing all the way up there? That's not very favorable indeed. And this is where your Saharan air is flowing off right now. That is why we're not seeing anything. So we're just going to have to wait and see. This is expected to drop back to the south where it should be at this time of year. And we can get this pseudo-September to October pattern out of the way once and for all. And going through time and steps, you'll begin to notice your intertropical convergence zone begins to migrate back down south again. We're still talking about 19 to 20 degrees north, but this is a lot more favorable for tropical weather activity. And you'll want to notice, where in the world did all of your wind shear go across the Atlantic? Well, we're going back into a traditional summertime pattern. Unfortunately, we're starting to see that here. Intertropical convergence zone, boom, look at that. You have your waves that really come down and crash southward, more towards your, 10 to 12 degrees north latitude line, and go into an area of almost zero wind shear. Yeah, you could definitely see where our environment is going for this hurricane season in quite the hurricane, if you will. And everything crashes further south. You're now down to about 9 to 10 degrees north in latitude, and we are back open for business. There's no excuse now why we can't see tropical weather development, and everything gets shunted all the way down here in your far southern Caribbean regions. And you could just see your path here of least resistance, if you will. There's really no least resistance at this point. And you have your dominating ridge here that is starting to set up across your central Atlantic, your anticyclone here, and that will draw systems more further south into the Caribbean. It will push it straight into the Gulf or your East Coast states as well. So this is when things will become a lot more significant in a very big hurry here as we move on through. And speaking of rapidly improving in a hurry, well, If that's not a sign of things to come, I don't know what is. Basically, no wind shear across the entire favorable tropical weather zone here, from the main development region, the Caribbean, and even into the southern Gulf of Mexico. And this powerful jet stream here to push storms much further inland at a much faster rate. This is what I've been seeing over our seasonal models, and we're finally seeing our verification in progress here. Whew, I know that was a lot of detail there, but we're going to take a look at our vorticity map, and let's start on the first frame. What on earth is this summertime pattern? This isn't a summertime pattern at all. We're seeing weird ridging out here, weird troughing back here. What even is this? What is going on over here with this random Azores ridge out here? Well, let me explain this to you in short. We still have the influence of Debbie up here. Believe it or not, I know it's been a while, but we still have the remnants of Debbie churning up here in the UK and even going further north, which is completely throwing off our summertime pattern and is distorting everything at this current point in time. But as we continue to move through and Debbie moves out, Ernesto begins to clear the field for us and will allow your anticyclone here over the Atlantic to migrate back. Remember, it was over here over the Azores, and it will move back off to your west here. You're back off to your southwest, which will allow for a much more favorable Atlantic pattern to set up here to drive your systems, your tropical waves, if you will, that begin to form a lot further off to your west. So, this is your general concern right here, and this is what tropical weather experts have been alluding to. Starting January, when the tropical weather forums opened up, they said, highly impactful season ahead, and this is exactly why. This anticyclone begins to push off further to the west here as you begin to have a much more zonal summertime pattern here with limited amounts of troughing back out in the eastern U.S. You have some ridging out here in your central U.S. that begins to get going, and you just see your overall slow summertime pattern begin to set up again. So you could just see here, look at this, a very pancake-shaped ridge here that is dominant. This right here, what this is going to do is it is not going to allow for recurves. This is impossible. This is also impossible. You're just going to see west. That is it at this time. And this just stays here. It doesn't go anywhere. You could actually start to see some of your little vorticity blops here going on, indicating your members, what your systems are going to be looking like here as they track, like I said, west. That is the only place they can go at this time, and everybody needs to be on high alert at this time. Now, I know that was a lot of information to take in. Let's just ease up a little and look at our GEFS pressure anomalies here on your different members. Right when your intertropical convergence zone opens up, you see an explosion of tropical weather activity that starts to set up. Now, I will note there isn't the best member agreement with this, so again, we need systems to see significant impacts like that in the Gulf there. Kind of look at that, wow. And you'll begin to see a lot more westward tracking systems here, and you can see these bursts where all of these members here get really close to the Gulf Coast and the southeast coastline. This is what I'm kind of watching out for here as your anticyclone becomes better established, and you just see more and more members popping off here in much more, impactful areas. So that's just a sign of what is to come up next. Now, at this time of year, it's always a tale of two models. I explained this in your last video here. We're seeing here on your European ensemble members here, a noteworthy decrease of wind shear when your intertropical convergence zone falls southward. And boy, very, very minimal wind shear across this entire area. So the GEFS and the European are both perfectly on board with this upcoming pattern change, and you begin to see a very formidable pattern setting up here, just wide open for business. We have just popped the lid straight off of the season here, and we are expecting a much more active period to set up here with, again, a dominating anticyclone. I will note this is a bit off to the east here, so slight chance of recurvature could be in play, but otherwise, just a potentially formidable period coming up here in the next few weeks that I will be keeping my eyeballs glued to on the weather model data. And once again, we'll be taking a look at our vorticity chart here. Same exact product we saw from the GEFS model. Ernesto moves out here, and it basically causes a full pattern reset as your anticyclone begins to migrate back off here to the southwest. So very important to note here, we're all going to be pressing the reset button on this, and boy, oh boy, you can see what really begins to shape up here. We're going fast. Look at that very, very dominant ridging pattern that sets up here. And it's just, it looks very unfortunate, really. I mean, we're not going to see many out to sea tracks. It's all going to be concentrated in this area here that we've all been screaming about. Experts have been screaming about all hurricane season. Now, this is a very cool product that I am happy to show off here. And much more knowledgeable weather enthusiast meteorologists like to show this off as well. This is your cyclone location spaghetti chart on your European ensemble. And you begin to see at the beginning of the time frame where your tropical waves are heading off from. Take a look at this. Your intertropical convergence zone, your ITZZ, is all the way at 22 degrees north latitude. This is extremely unfavorable, and your waves at this point will be coming off of the Saharan desert. So you really aren't going to see anything here. But as we go through time, the second this shifts far enough south, look at your members lighting up here. All of your little, pathways finding, their locations here in the main development region as we go through. Take a look at all those little squiggly lines. That will indicate a much more favorable time frame. And some of these, rapidly, explosively intensify. Just take a look at some of these members. This is why you cannot take your eyes off of this season, and also why, here's your daily reminder for every video, do not forget to check the National Hurricane Center often for more updates from the professionals. Another cool thing I want to note with this chart is your general flow of these systems. I want you to take a look at this. Guess where your high pressure anticyclone is? Yep. Whoa, we're driving it a lot further west now, aren't we? So this is a very substantial pattern change coming up undoubtedly at this point. And if you still don't believe me and you're still like, well, Alex, this is probably going to bust. Why is there basically nothing out there now? You have Ernesto that's going out to sea, but why isn't there anything in the Caribbean that's heading towards the US? Explain yourself. Yeah, well, it's called climatology. We're not supposed to exactly see that yet, and we're currently looking at mid-August here. We do notice a bit of a ramp up, but sometimes this can be a bit delayed, and I want you to note that we're not even halfway up this huge mountain here of activity. We only reach this peak on September 10th. Let me repeat myself. We only will reach this peak on September 10th. We still have just under a month to go until we could really say that this season won't do anything. And even then, you have activity that lasts all the way until early November here. And it looks like the pattern will be favorable for those conditions. So please do not go calling off the season yet. Do not go saying, bust, 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 because that is not the right mindset to be in right now. We all heard it from the professionals. This is going to take some time. This will be a back-end loaded season. They've been saying this since really May and June. So, just kind of be mindful of that. And if you've heard any other information that this was going to be a very early start, well, it was misinterpreted from the professionals and put into a kind of blender where it didn't come out correctly to the viewers. So just kind of keep that in mind. Be careful who you trust when it comes to this type of stuff. With that being said, thank you all so much for tuning into today's rather lengthy video, but I hope you enjoyed the detailed discussion that I had. If you did, please be sure to smash that like button and even subscribe to the channel below so you can get notifications on when I do more videos. Also, feel free to share with your friends and family because it would help spread the word. We need as many people as possible to know about this upcoming pattern change. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care and have a wonderful afternoon.